Hi, it's me, Kay Cook, and welcome to another in the series of Live Thrive, where I'm having cool conversations with some very inspirational people. And yet again, I'm delighted to introduce to you Kathleen La Valle, a great teacher, mentor, and something pretty special within the Society of NLP. Welcome so much, Kathleen. Great to see you again.
Hi, Kay, and thanks for having me back. We had so much fun the last time. I was excited when you said, you want to come back and do another one? I was like, yeah, sure.
Oh, it was so great, and it's been a really successful podcast. We've trended on many of the social media posts. I don't know what trending means, but apparently
I hear it's good. I don't know. I hear it's a good thing.
Probably better to trend than not to trend, I'm guessing. So welcome again. We are still in the sort of coming out of COVID-19 lockdown here in England, and I guess you're still doing something similar across the pond. Do you have some sort of movement now? Can you get out and about yet?
Yeah, we're slowly opening up. Well, here in New Jersey, because all the states are different. But here in New Jersey, I think yesterday they were opening up hair salons. But it's kind of crazy. You can go to a hair salon, but you can't get your hair blown dry.
Oh.
So you can go get your hair colored and cut, but they won't blow it dry. And I was like, that's weird. But I guess they don't want the movement of the air. So you have to go home with wet hair.
Wow.
And I was like, well, when you dye your hair, you want to see what the color looks like once it's dried. But
Yeah.
so they got some weird, regulations. But at least you can go get your hair cut and colored. But you just don't. You'd be surprised when you go home and it dries what it actually looks like.
And then you have to wait another 6 months for another appointment, I guess.
Yeah, I haven't even called. I've been dying for a pedicure. I haven't even called because the place I go to, I called, and they weren't even taking messages anymore. Their voice box was full, the mailbox, and now it's probably 6 months for an appointment.
We'll be sorted for Christmas, maybe.
I hear you guys are going to have some freedom on Independence Day this year, July 4th. That's our Independence Day.
We are heading into the American way, that's for sure. When they announced July the 4th, I thought, yeah. There's something going on there between the two countries, isn't there? And yes, apparently so. So Kathleen, last time we spoke about creativity, and we explored some ways of being creative and the reasons for being creative. Something that struck me this morning was how you have built within our team this engagement with metaphor and how we can build models inside our head and change the submodalities of the people in front of us through small words that pack a punch and create a whole new movie inside somebody's head. So with metaphor, it's the real magic of language and how it lands inside our minds and triggers and stimulates wonderful pictures and sounds. You teach us how to use those packs of language in powerful ways. What kind of metaphors do you most enjoy seeing the results of?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the situations. I mean, obviously in business, you're in a different scenario where your metaphors have to be more general purpose, that are relatable. You're not going to sit down in a business meeting and talk about the big old dragon comes and scares the villagers. You might be able to do that in 1 or 2 words. You're not going to do those kinds of metaphors. But there's very powerful metaphors that we use all the time that I think we flippantly use them without realizing the power of them. And one of the exercises that we did with the team, I'm talking about the support training team that works on our seminars with Dr. Bandler and John and myself. These are trainers and master trainers from around the world. And, when we have downtime, we have playtime where we practice some skills and learn some things together. And I think it's a great, it makes me feel wonderful that, the team is always hungry for more information and more learning. And it just makes for better resources for all our students as well. One of the exercises we did was I challenged you all to take the least amount of words and make the most impactful metaphor. Because if I told you to make me a metaphor about wasting time, so you might say about, well, they would tell me the story about the was it the grasshopper or the ant or one of those that didn't go collect food for the winter and all that stuff. And he played around. He didn't want to, everybody warned him, go collect food. You know, you do all this whole metaphor about, you know, and it's a nice story, but either people get lost in the story or they can't relate to an ant and a grasshopper, and things happen because there's too many things going on. There's too many words. And we all know that, you know, that the impact of sometimes a single word has a lot to do with the density or the semantic density of that word as to what it actually represents in our brain. So I think, I'm trying to think, the example I gave you guys was time is money. You know, that's 3 words. It's a metaphor because time isn't money, but there's a whole metaphor in there that, you know, that wasting time, and that's still about wasting time and being successful and doing things. There's a whole lot of stuff packed. Time is money. And so that was the example I gave. And we had some great metaphors that you guys came up with, and people were getting it down to 2 words and 1 word. And, you know, it was like,
I remember it was a great exercise. I loved it. I think mine was time bomb.
Time bomb. That's right. And these are things that, because they mean so much and you can say it in such a concise manner, that, you know, it has a definite an effect. In business world, a lot of times you can use examples of, you know, certain situations from the past that were difficult to solve and then they were resolved. If you see the team going down the wrong path in a business meeting and you just refer to the Anderson project, you know, and it's like everybody goes, oh, wait, no, yeah, no, not going there again. So sometimes it's that simple, is that, you know, it's like an anchor almost for a, you know, no, we're not going there. We're not doing that again. There's many different levels, but really what we're talking about is the semantic density of these words. And what that means is that, you know, in our brain, if we look at things like the phonological ambiguities, so if we say a word, and we talked about this in the last podcast, we say a word like check, you know, it could be a written check of money. It could be to check something. It could be a check mark, you know, a check on something. So these are all different processes, but that one word runs to all those places in the brain. And now if you pick better words, they not only running to multiple places in the brain, but they're running to more exciting places in the brain. So simply like a word, if I say, you know, I gave you lunch and I said to you, how was your lunch? And you said, oh, it was good, very tasty. And that would mean one level, you know. Now, if you said to me a deeper word, like, you know, it was delectable, it was, you know, it was salivating, it was just, you know, and you start describing things in richer, denser words, it means that it's pulling more information. An example I give in the seminars is if I asked you what you had for lunch 4 Tuesdays ago. Now, unless you have the same thing every Tuesday for lunch or the same thing every day for lunch, it's not easy to grab that piece of information from 4 weeks ago, what I had for lunch. I don't know. But if I said to you, the last time you were at a really great party, you were at a big event, and you were, you know, what did you have to eat that day? And people will say to me, oh, it was amazing. We had like these little pieces of chicken, and it was in this, you know, satay sauce. And then it was like you know, afterwards we had this fish, and the fish had almonds on it. And it was like, I'm like, when was this? And they go, oh, it was like 2 years ago. It was my friend's wedding. And I'm like, you could tell me what you had to eat 2 years ago, but you couldn't tell me what you had 4 weeks ago. Why is that? Because the semantic density of that meal from that wedding was attached, that meal was attached in the brain to more places, the feelings that were going on, the music, the sounds, the relationships, the friendships, everything around that meal was plugged into more places, but also deeper, richer places in the brain than something you ate and it was tasted good and you liked it and you had a nice time and it was yummy, you know. So we can pick words that are denser in terms of being able to trigger things, you know, even just simple difference between it tastes good and it was delicious. Delicious has a different submodalities than tastes good. And when you look at those submodalities, that's also the path or the direction to increasing things. Because when you start working with people, like, for example, if you want to take somebody through threshold, then you need to know what are the drivers, especially the critical drivers that push things to increase. So when you start talking to someone and you pay attention and listen and watch how they react when they use certain words, then by using different words and watching the reaction, you can see if you're pushing things bigger or smaller without having to say, can you make the picture bigger? Can you make it closer? So the semantic density of the words that we use also have an impact in that respect of affecting the submodalities in the brain.
When you ask somebody a question like that and all of this information comes out, it gives us a chance to calibrate, as you say, so many different things that are important to them and those drivers. So that's the expansion, isn't it? That's where somebody opens up, but then we want to close them down as well, don't we, to get them more specific sometimes. So I always think that this opening up and closing down.
Absolutely. I mean, as I said in the first part of that question, it's really all of this is content related or context related in terms of how you're using, because there's times when you want to narrow somebody down because they're off in the sky. They're trying to write a book and they're often, in this blue sky somewhere, and they haven't really even thought about, anything in focus. And they wonder why they look at the blank piece of paper and they can't begin, because they're off in the blue sky of the book's done and it's wonderful. And it's, so there's times when you want to pull in and get down to specifics. And then there's times when you want to, for example, for threshold or other things like that, where you want to expand and push beyond. So in any case, I mean, let's make this clear up front. In any case, any interaction with your person, whether it's your client, your customer, your group, you need to have your goal up front. You need to have your purpose. Like Richard's new book, Thinking on Purpose. I mean, you need to have a purpose first before you walk into a room with a group of students, before you walk into that business meeting, before you walk in before your client. You need to know what your purpose is. Because if you're randomly just throwing things out, then you get what you get, and you have to work a lot harder in the long run. So I mean, of course, there's times you want to chunk down, there's times you want to chunk up, and there's times you want to chunk laterally. You have to have that purpose going in, what you're going to do.
Yeah, I think that's such an important word, the word purpose. I think it's, I ask myself, and I invite my clients to ask themselves, what is the purpose of what I'm about to say? What is the purpose of what you're about to do? It often pulls me away from an old pattern where I would just pitch up and go, blah, because I could. And rather than just go, what would be the purpose of contributing to that business meeting?
Right.
And sometimes it's just maybe strategically to get some airspace, of course. But I think what I've learned over time through NLP is that the more precise I can be in what it is I want to get to, the bigger, faster, easier the result is. And it feels like a bit of a cleanup. It's a bit like vacuum cleaning inside the brain. So yeah, I've worked very hard on that over the years, and it's just so much smoother. And you teach us this, of course.
Sometimes you have to clean the attic sometimes and get those cobwebs out.
Yeah, which is another great metaphor. Spring cleaning.
Yeah.
I just put out on social media this morning another part of an interview I did with Richard, and in it there is the whole metaphor of how are we keeping our minds in order. It's the most important thing that we teach people, especially in COVID-19, to wash hands, to take personal hygiene very seriously, to wear the mask. But it comes back to, what are we doing for personal hygiene within our brains? And
I think that's the biggest issue right now with what people are going through, is that the ritual part is great. I mean, it's absolutely great that, you know, a lot of people actually find comfort in that ritual. At least they know they're doing something. They know they can wash their hands and they can do it better. And then someone's actually taken the time to explain how to do it. You know, as kids, we're told to go wash your hands, but not all parents sat there and said, you know, make sure you get in between the fingers and, you know, or up to the, you know, they just go wash your hands. Did you wash your hands? Yeah, wash my hands. Okay, good. Now you can sit down and eat. So it's like, you know, it was a whole educational process on, you know, I love the one they had with the gloves and the ink, and they were washing the hands with the ink, and then to see where the ink was still, you know, through normal washing, where the ink was still there, and then how to do it the right way. And I was like, wow, it's like I never realized that, you know, for 64 years there, I've been washing my hands and not as, you know, as well as I could have been. I'm like, old dogs can learn new tricks, you know. So the ritual part is good, you know, because that gives us something to do, that we feel we can do something. The mind rituals is where the NLP comes in, because, you know, people were having a lot of fear and anxiety, and they weren't doing the things they normally do. They were taken out of their environment. They were taken out of their get on the bus, get on the train, go to work, come home. All of a sudden now they're home all the time. And people were getting stir crazy. People were getting depressed. People were getting, because the key that we talked about last time was the creativity, because that should have been a blessing. I mean, most people's like, gosh, you know, it's like I always joke, I would kill for this much time off to do, you know, and it's like, wow, it's all this free time, you know, and then people are still complaining about having free time. And I'm going, it's a whole universe of things that you could be doing. I love all the museums that we're doing, all the, you know, the virtual tours. I was like walking through museums that I never, you know, thought I would even get to, you know, and now I'm walking through I'm walking through Egyptian tombs. I'm walking through, it's like, you know, I mean, and that comes out of that attitude, you know, so we have to get people to the point where they realize that you don't have to feel a certain way. You don't have to feel trapped because you're trapped in your house. You don't have to feel bad because you can't go, you know, out to the bar and have a drink. You know, there's just so much. I'm going to share something. My biggest lesson when I was in practitioner training, this is how limited my brain was in practitioner. First time I took a practitioner training, I was literally floored, sat back in my chair, gasped, and was like, oh, what? I did not know that you could choose how you feel. Didn't know that. I always thought that your emotions were something that just happened based on something else that happened. I mean, and it was like a complete alien concept to me that, wait a minute, wait, you're telling me I can actually choose how I feel in a situation? Like, and even if I wanted to feel differently, there were the social norms that said I shouldn't feel this way, you know, but it was like, wait a minute, all that's off? I can actually choose, and how intensely, you know, I'm like, floored me, absolutely floored me. And people don't know this.
It's a bit scary, I think, when you discover it for the first time, because you have to step up and take responsibility for.
I was gasped. I was like, what? No, to me it was kid in a candy shop. I was like, really?
Yeah.
I was very excited. It did not scare me at all. I was very excited. And I was thinking, man, I'm going to be a tough person to live with for the next until I get this whole thing down, because it was like a fire hose. Yeah, it was like,
oh, firecracker.
The gate, you know, the gates were open. The horse race started. You know.
Yeah. But you were ready. I think, you know, by the time people come to practitioner land, they are already beginning to open up those gates, aren't they? It's It's where people are at when people come and see us as clients who, you know, they are stuck because they're trapped inside the mind prison, and all of their feelings belong to somebody else, or, you know, they can attribute blame to somebody else or something else. So I always think it's just that little, it takes a little while sometimes or they have to have a compelling experience to discover that. And even once they've discovered it, then there's still that, well, what are you going to do with this new power? Because it's, this is very exciting.
It is.
So I'm thinking a lot about the language part of NLP. And although the theme of this chat is creativity, the language is very magical, isn't it? It's very, the more creative we are with the way we combine bits or words together in certain sequences, for example, in a metaphor, the more we can drive people's neurology faster towards what they want, having established what they want. I know that you're particularly interested in those language bits, aren't you? I know I keep bringing you back to it because I've seen you so many times deliver meta model, and each time I learn something new, because you make it so simple, and yet and it is, of course, and yet it seems to have such, it's one of those time, it's not a time bomb, is it? I'm thinking of it's a firecracker. I'm going to use that one again. It's the firecracker inside the brain. And I watch from the back of the room or the side of the room, these kind of, you know, these faces. It's like, oh my god, you know, like you were the first time you learned that you could control your feelings. You see these our students, and it's just a wonderful thing to see. How do you keep your enthusiasm, because, you know, it's constantly there for this magical interaction with language?
Well, I think that, you know, that there's so many great pieces of NLP. I mean, and certainly the result is, you know, the slew of techniques you can use, and techniques are nice and they're important to learn as a starting point and as a backup, but it's not the magic of NLP. The real magic of NLP is in the language, and I tell people this all the time. I said the techniques will work until the first time it doesn't, and guaranteed it will not work at one point, because a technique is put together from general information, and you don't work with general people, you work with specific clients. So the technique is only a guideline. It's a time. This is something that works with most people. This is something, over all the times we've put this together, it usually works. However, what makes the difference is the language works all the time, and the magic is in the language. When you listen with a client, the first thing you're going to do is start listening to the client's language, because what's important, that things are there, is also what's not there. And that's the distinction, is when you're listening to someone speak about the situation or what they want to accomplish, you know, you're listening for what's there and you're listening for what's not there. And that really helps you in terms of guiding your own purpose, in terms of how you're going to be helping them. But also in the language itself helps if you're going to do a technique. If you don't use the right language, then the technique has even less chance of success. I've seen so many people, it reminds me of when we do sales trainings in companies. You watch a salesperson and you give them all these great skills, and then you watch them do their role playing, you know, a sales scenario, and you watch them take that right up to the point where they're going to sign, and then in one sentence, it just like sticks the pin in the balloon and it goes, you know, and you're like, doing so good, you know, because they used a phrase, or they used a different presupposition, or they used a different command without even realizing it, because, you know, they don't have all the NLP skills yet, you know. And a lot of people, once we do sales trainings for them, they always want to come back and do a practitioner, because they want that whole base of language under there. But the same thing, I've watched a person working with a client, and it's like clients like, yes, yes, yes. And then they go and so maybe in the future, maybe in the future, maybe in the future, what? And you could just see the client go like a little bit of disappointment. It's like, now you have this new feeling. Maybe you can take this, maybe, like, because it just shifts where they were going. They were like, woo, and you went, So understanding the power of the words and the real magic behind it, or even listening to how a client presents where the issues are. I mean, you can take it to the point where you can even already have ideas of where the submodalities are from the language they use, what direction they're moving in, some of their sorting patterns. I mean, there's so much wealth of information that is in every phrase they use. And so the real magic of NLP is when you understand the language models and how to use them. Richard discusses this, and many times you hear any of these webinars, Richard's been doing interviews with you as well. Richard goes on all the time and says it's not just the language. Of course, he goes even beyond with the algorithms and the calculus that he's built over the 50 years of expertise, and he's a whole other kind of genius. I'm working with the language patterns, and I can do those. But he will say that this is what change is, and this is why somebody will take an NLP technique, do it with somebody, it works great, and a week later it falls apart, or a month later it falls apart, or 6 months later, because they haven't built the whole model for them. They haven't built the whole process. They missed things that were being said, because they weren't listening to the language, or they didn't install the language. Simply in meta model, we do on practitioner level, I always give them the experience of the patterns first, rather than just throwing labels out there, because I want them to build a passion for the model. I want them to build a passion for the language patterns. I myself, when I first learned practitioner, it was before I even trained with Richard, and I was scared to death of the meta model when they taught it, because they taught it from this, you better remember these labels because these are important. And if you don't remember these labels, and and I was like, and then when, of course, the first time I learned it from Richard, I just fell in love with the meta model. I mean, it was like all the scary spiky things were taken off it, the cage of barbed wire and all the traps that were in there, they were all taken away. And it was like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, wait, this is what it's for. And thank God we found that very early on in our NLP studies. And then we just exclusively ended up mostly training with Richard after that, because it was just the opening of that model for me. So I became very passionate about the language, and I know the difference. I see the difference when somebody's really good at NLP. You can really understand that they're using the models, listening to the models, watching the models, and they know how to use it, because it is the magic. It's the cement, it's the glue, it's the glitter, it's everything else that surrounds the whole techniques. And techniques, it's funny talking about glue and cement. Most times when I work with a client, I never do a technique. I might start piece of a swish pattern, and then I might do half of a change personal history and some timeline, and end up with a collapsing anchor or something. It's like I don't, end up picking and choosing, what the person needs in that moment. And the reason you know what to pick and choose is because you're listening to where the client's at and how they're representing, their model at that moment. So it's so important. The language, you've got to get the language patterns down.
It reminds me of my first practitioner, which was very much techniques, all about the techniques. And I came away, I had the personal change I was looking for. So that was great. But I came away frightened because I don't have a linear patterning in my brain easily. Of course I can, but you know, it isn't my
Yeah.
go-to. And I just, so it just threw me back inside my head all the time of, what do I do next? What do I do next? What do I do next? Rather than being present on the outside.
Yeah.
And the gift of coming to London for the first time and seeing Richard and John on stage, and just suddenly it was John who talked about, you know, this, well, now you can play, you know, you can, like you say, you can put all these things together. And that was just such a revelation to me. That was one of my, you talk about your, you know, moment, that was a huge moment in my, okay, I'm ready to go, I want more of this is fantastic. And you know, I remember once, the first time I ran a practitioner course, I was demonstrating, at the time we were teaching 6-step reframe, which we don't teach now, but that was, you know, what was happening. And at the time, a couple of the assistants halfway through, out of my peripheral vision, I could see them pick up their files and start looking like, she's gone off script, she's not doing what she's supposed to do. And I just thought, do you know what, I because I needed to do something else with the demonstration in that moment. And I was a new trainer and I was very keen, we were recording everything, I was really keen to get it, but I thought, no, the you know, the well-formed outcome, the need of that
Right.
demonstration was greater than following the script. So yeah, I mean, and the more we can combine all of those different techniques together, it feels very powerful, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the meta model itself, as you know, I teach 2 levels of that, one in the practitioner and then one in the master prac. But they're both based on the fact that, and this was a big revelation for me, that this is the way the brain works. This is the way the brain develops from childhood.
Yeah.
And it's a progression that makes sense neurologically, brainologically, whatever you want to call it, brainiacally. It's a new word now.
Love it, love it. Brainiacally. Yep.
Brainiacally.
Trademarked.
It's the way that it progresses. It makes sense. You know, people say things like, "Oh, my internal dialogue." You know, again, it's another thing they think they can't control. Oh, well, you know, I have this internal dialogue. Well, your internal dialogue is your DOS. You know, it's back in the old days we had, you know, computers and it was DOS logic and, you know, type things, almost coding as you were going along. Things weren't as automatic as they are now. But in programming language, I mean, that programming language runs, and that's what your internal dialogue is. It's you running your brain. Now, how you do it, the tone of voice you're using and what words you choose, and even how you can even meta model yourself. We had a great exercise we did one time. John actually led it, where he had everybody just write out their internal dialogue. He said, Eric, I'm going to start the clock. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Just write out everything you're saying to yourself in your head. You know, just write out your internal dialogue. And then he had them go with a partner and meta model each other's internal dialogue. So to, you know, ask questions and it was really, and to start patterning, you know, what was the pattern that they were using when they talked to themselves in terms of, you know, the deletions, distortions, generalizations. And it was such a great exercise because people don't realize that, you know, it's not just the tone of voice and the volume and the location, but also the patterns that you're using inside your own internal dialogue, you know, and how can you make that more useful, and how can you set that in direction for, you know, the things that you want to accomplish. And if you're doing things to yourself, like, you know, deleting things that need to be recovered, or overgeneralizing or undergeneralizing, you know, then you can do, so it's a great little exercise to do. You just sit there and write out everything, you know, in your internal dialogue. And of course, you know, in the beginning, you'll be like, well, I can't believe I'm sitting here, and you're writing out, I can't believe I'm sitting here writing out my dialogue and saying everything I'm saying to myself, I'm writing down in a piece of paper. Eventually you give that up and you just start writing, you know, just general thinking of, you know, what goes on in your head. And But you go back and look at that, and compare that to, if that was a client saying something to you, what would you say? What don't you know? What questions would you want to ask? I have a little pet peeve of mine when people say, we're going to challenge the meta model questions or statements, and I don't like that. To me, it's a recovery process. It's a discovery process. We're not challenging meta model violations. They're not meta model violations. They're meta model patterns. I always make a big joke of that on stage. I go, it's not a meta model violation. You're not going to get pulled over and go to court and get a linguistic sentence or something. It's like, it's not, there's no ticket for it. They're just patterns, and they're patterns that help you to understand where somebody is focusing and where their purpose is. To go back to purpose, where their purpose lies in the things they're saying to themselves. And sometimes their purpose does lie in the things they're saying to themselves. And you have to find out how to uncover the truth in there, because, our brain is just running. It's constantly doing that, and sometimes it's more conscious than other times, but, so it's a great little exercise to just write out your internal dialogue, or if you have people, play group together or whatever, to then, do each other's dialogues and meta model, ask the questions. It's recovery and discovery. They're not challenging and violations. You recover information, you discover information.
I think sometimes the people who are, as Richard says, stuck at the early levels of his development, and they use phrases like linguistic violations. It's very style, isn't it? It's a aggressive term, and of course, I like that, discovery, recovery. So you've used the phrase, looking for what is there and shouldn't be there, and what's missing. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to say things should be there. It's you look for what's missing in terms of, if you're working with a client and you know where they want to go, and so the certain things that they're saying doesn't line up with where they want to go, and then certain things are missing. And it's not they should be there, but it gives you a clue as to where you're going to have to take them, because you don't know what it is yet. Because that's why, in NLP, we're adamant about getting a really good desired state for somebody, and, making sure that exactly what they want. They've tried it on, they know it works, and there's all magic in that as well, which we can discuss in a moment. But let's go back to what I was saying about the developmental process. Let's look at the meta model first level. When we have an experience, and these things happen every moment in time. So we have an experience, we're having one now, and then we have another one. And that information is taken in through all of our senses, and it goes into our structure, our memory. And then somebody comes along and says, hey, how was that experience? Well, you have to go in and recover from memory what that was, and then assemble it to have some sort of communication on the outside. Whether it be verbal or nonverbal, it doesn't matter. There's a communication that happens when someone asks you a question or someone makes a statement in front of you. And the thing that happens in between those three steps, we have that experience, then we're taking in the data and we're storing it in memory. It's getting filtered, either through our rep systems, it's through our sorting patterns, our beliefs, our values, all the things that, we have, that we filter and choose what we're paying attention to, what our purpose is, what our focus is. And we're also deleting, distorting, and generalizing information, which is the meta model patterns, deletions, distortions, and generalizations. So the information is being deleted, distorted, and generalized. And then we go into memory, and then somebody asks us for a communication. We got to go back into memory, and the whole process starts all over again. So that the experience that someone is describing to you when you say to a client what it is that you want, what is it that you want? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want from me today? How can I help you? Whatever it is, or how was that concert you went to last week? They have to go back into the deep structure, or the memory, and they pull it out through all the filters again, and then they speak it to you. So you know just physiologically, just brainiacally, that that information has been filtered at least twice.
Yeah.
At least twice, minimum. So anything that comes out on the surface structure, you already know is going to be missing some things. It's going to have some distortion and some generalization. My goal, my passion in teaching the meta model is to make sure people understand that that's not a bad thing. There's a lot of people go, ooh, that's where you get into violation stuff. It's not a bad thing to delete, distort, and generalize information, because if we couldn't do that, we'd be missing a lot of things. Now, deletions, of course, if we didn't have the ability to delete, we'd go insane, because we couldn't track all the data that's going on in any moment in time and be able to store all that data and be able to repeat all that data. I mean, imagine, you know, so you couldn't do that and somebody said, how are you today? I mean, it would take them years to tell you how they are. You know, you wouldn't have that ability to pack things differently. So deletions are definitely necessary. Now, in generalizations, it's commonly known that generalizations is the ability of learning, pattern recognition, that we can generalize things. We can say things like this, you know, we see a chair with a spike on it. We're not going to go, that looks comfortable, you know, but we see a chair with a nice cushion, you know, on it. We go, that might be comfortable. You'd still want to make sure there wasn't a tack inside the cushion or something, but you can make generalizations that certain things are going to be comfortable and certain things may not be comfortable. Certain things are going to be, you know, hard or soft or tall or short, or you can look at things and can I reach that? Can I not reach that? There's generalizations are part of pattern recognition, which is really useful in learning processes. You can begin to pack things, and it kind of takes up less space when you can generalize these things. Now, the key is you still need to be able to unpack them to be able to use them and not make the generalization, you know, and that's part of a problem, you know, when people overgeneralize things. So, you know, if you had a bad experience with somebody who was short, then all short people are bad. You know, that's not a good generalization, but you can make generalizations in terms of pattern recognition and learning. It's a useful tool to have. Now, distortions is my favorite. It's my favorite pattern in the meta model. And because distortions is one of your favorite topics as well, is the pattern of creativity. You know, that's the whole point of creativity, is that you can look at something and distort it. You know, I don't know if you have the show over there in the UK, but here in the States, we have a flea market flip.
Flea market. They have something similar here.
You know what a flea market is, right? So people take out their old fallen apart stuff and they sell it really cheap, and people roam around and pick stuff up, and, you know, but they take something, you know, that's like an old corn husker, the old farm days where you put the corn in and you pull the crank and it pulled all the niblets off the corn cob, you know, and the next thing you know, they take it home and now it's a lamp or something, or it's a, you know, I love that kind of stuff, because you look at something and everyone looks at it and goes, oh, that's a piece of junk. It's an old corn husker. It probably doesn't even work anymore. And who the hell wants to husk corn? I can just, you know, buy it now. You know, but somebody else will look at it and go, oh my God, it's a, you know, it's a lamp, or it's a whatever. So that distortion is the ability to take things and transform them. Creativity and transformation. That's why it's my favorite meta model pattern, is because to me that's magical. When you can look at something and distort it into something that's more useful or just different. So I think that, you know, these patterns, when you look at them as actual useful tools, you know, then it gives you a different perspective on, you know, when you're talking with people to begin to think, you know, how they're shifting things or transforming things or patterning things together, or how they delete things. Because when you build something for them, with them, for their change, you want to put it into that magic combination so that it becomes something that's going to fit the level of information, and it's going to fit the pattern recognition ability that they have, and give them something that's going to distort into what they thought was a problem is now, something new and exciting that they can use, in a different way. So by understanding the patterns, it also gives you better change work as well.
As you were speaking though, I was remembering somebody that I've worked with recently who had a sort of an OCD, if you want to give it a label, type problem. Can't remember in the conversation that we discussed the topic of tenacity, and the client said, well, I have no tenacity, I have no determination at all. I'm like, really? Okay. Because you've got to be pretty determined to whatever it is you do repeatedly, and it's those are
that's tenacity.
in my brain. I'm just like, because you're seeing what's there. We are seeing what's there that they can't see yet,
and for her, the definition of tenacity, has a very limited scope. So what she's doing isn't tenacity. But so these are things that, that's why it's so important then to just, because somebody else would take that situation and go, so she has no tenacity. Oh, okay, so we have to build tenacity. We have to do, so like an anchor, maybe a sliding anchor for tenacity, or, and it's like, that's not where we're going with this. So it's so important to really listen, to what your client is saying and understand not just the content, because they all lie. We all lie. Yeah. You ask me what I want, I'm probably going to lie to you. It's just, it happens.
Yeah.
But there's all this information that's there. And of course it's, lying is not really lying, but it's just filtered information. It's not the truth. We have to, go beyond that and really look at the patterns. You've got to go beyond the content and go to the process. NLP is all about the process. It's not about the content.
And that's such an important message, that word that you've repeated lots of times, and we repeat lots of times, is patterns. These are just brain patterns. And somehow by that kind of, I always think it lifts us up a little bit, and we can look down into our brain and go, oh, look, there's some patterns down there, some highways and some slow roads and some bridges and some curves, but they're just structures, aren't they? They're just patterns, and there are flows.
It's all useful. They all have a purpose.
Completely. I picked up some patterns of phrases that come from some children that I've worked with over the years, and I just sort of brought a bundle along because in our work largely we are with the, if I'm going to call it end user, that's not actually true, but by the time a client comes to us, or we're in a business consultancy or something, the problems and the patterns are fairly established, and they've created a narrative to hold them and so on. And one of my passions is to build powerful machines in children right at the very beginning, so that by the time they reach adulthood, these extreme problems hopefully won't, well, they may occur, but the children as growing humans will have better skills to be able to meta-model themselves and each other along the way. So I wanted to show, these are random bits of work that the kids have produced, but one of the questions was, working through the 5 senses, so see, hear, feel, touch, smell, taste, things that make you feel happy, things that make you feel sad. And the one that it's actually, I think this one's actually in Happy Brain book, is the thing that makes me feel sad when I look at it is no Christmas presents, no money, no sweetie tin. And you're like, this child is 9 years old and they are hallucinating these things that are missing ahead of time. Or are they remembering something that that has been missing in their something from a memory? And what I found strongly as a missing link in the adults around the kids is the adults go, oh, okay. And nobody picks up the little thread of, wow, that no Christmas presents? Is that something that has happened to you in the past? Or is it something that you're imagining in the future? So, we could just open up those conversations instead of going, oh.
Right. Well, the statement there, I mean, I thought you said he used the word is. There is no.
The frame was set in the present time.
Right.
Yeah.
So just as an example of what we were talking about, when somebody says something like that, even if you weren't forcing them in the situation to tell me what makes you sad, that was kind of a forced issue. But if somebody says there is no Christmas presents and it's not Christmas, then that tells you, just an example of what we were talking about, and that tells you two things. Either they've projected themselves to next Christmas and there's no presents, or they've projected themselves to the past, but in either case, what they've done is associated to the memory. That's a clue, is that they didn't say there was no presence. When they say there is no presence, then, you have a clue that, they're probably not only in the memory, but they've associated, so these are the things I'm talking about when you're listening to a client. Sometimes it's the smallest piece. That doesn't mean you make the assumption. Yeah. It just means that you need to ask more questions. Like you said, most people would just brush that off and go, okay, yes, a sad memory. Want some ice cream? Whatever, just move on to something else. But it's, and especially with children, I myself grew up not wealthy at all, very poor family. The funny part is the way my parents handled it, I didn't know. I never considered, it wasn't until I was much older I realized, yeah, we were poor. It was like, because, it wasn't the attitude, and they always did things that made whatever was little, big, fun, crazy, stuff. I didn't know it took 2 years to save up enough money to go to the circus. I mean, I didn't know you could go to the circus more than once, or I didn't even know it was there every year or 3 times a year or whatever. But it wasn't, nobody made a big thing about it, so it was always like, whatever happened was a treat and it was exciting. So, this is a great lesson for adults as well. The power of the language and how you represent things and how you say things and what you can distort into making things exciting. We had things like the end of the week, we had canned hash for dinner because it was always the last night before the paycheck. We always, at that time, it was some canned hash, and maybe if there was eggs, we'd have an egg on it or something. But they made it like an exciting, like it's hash night. We can't, and it was like, I always look forward to it. It was like, oh my God, tomorrow's corned beef hash night. It was like, never knew that it was because the check wasn't coming till tomorrow, and we were out of groceries, and so it was whatever was in the cupboard. I didn't know. So it's how you represent the world that really affects.
Yeah, it reminds me of a conversation I overheard between a parent, a single parent, and a couple of kids. And it was like, well, yes, I know you want that, but actually we don't have the money and we can't do that thing and we can't give it to you. I wish I could, but I can't. And you're like, I'm like, oh, what? You could literally see all that energy draining away from the kids and the parents.
And the beliefs and values that you're building at the same time that all this stuff's draining away. What are you building?
Yeah.
Yeah. And people don't know this stuff. It's not taught, I mean, everyone needs to learn NLP.
I'm on a mission. We're on a mission. We're trying. Speaking of everyone needs to learn NLP, we've, as a group of trainers, we've just sent out into the world NLP for the World, a collection of chapters written by some of the international team. What a great book, isn't
it? Yeah, very proud of that. They did a great job. Came out of a bunch of us were on a Zoom call and, thinking, well, what can we do? What could we possibly do? We're all sitting around here staring at each other. That's something that, we've been sending it out to people that ask for information off our website. And we just include a free copy of it with seminar package information. It's just been it's been amazing, the response that we're getting for it. I think it's great. And like I said, I love the team has been getting together at least twice a month, if not more. And we're doing things. We're either running skill drills or we're bringing in experts from different topics to listen to them. And so, the fact that, we saw before, it's a limiting situation only in your mind. You take this time and we could feel bad about it, or we could take this time and get a chance to do things that we don't usually have time for. Like I got to learn about LinkedIn. I got to learn about funnels. I got to learn about kinds of crazy things that, I just haven't had time, to really explore because, we're busy training, we're busy, doing things.
That kind of fits with that, when you are listening to what's not there, or noticing what's not there in somebody, the resource that they need in order to propel them into their future. That's the same sort of pattern for us, isn't it? There was this big gap where none of us could reach our customers and clients in first hand and go to the training seminars. So there was this big gap, and we recognized it wasn't there, and we all plowed in really fast to fill it up and keep everything running smoothly. So
Richard's been running lots of webinars. I mean, he's out there 2 or 3 times a week, doing webinars all over the world, in different countries, for some of our master trainers and trainers around the world, just so that their students can, come listen for a couple hours and get to know, who Richard is, and ask some questions, get some answers. I mean, it's great, to have that time to do that exposure. So people that normally wouldn't even get to sit and chat with Richard for 2 hours are getting that opportunity. So it's, in a lot of ways, there's a lot of, good things that have come out of this craziness. I'm not sitting here saying I'm so glad it happened, and I'm saying at the same time, so much good stuff has come from it, at the same time. And that's because it's what you make out of it. I mean, I know other people that are suffering through this and just miserable, and, they're just not having a great time with it. But it's by choice. I'm sorry, but it is by choice. There's always something good you can make of it. Certainly, my heart goes out to the people that have lost their lives and families that have lost family members. And that's just tragic, absolute tragic. And I can't even fathom those kind of things going on, and the way some of those have been handled is absolutely tragic. And the people that have not been affected that way, it's choice about how you want to handle your time, off. Or I don't consider it to be time off, because actually I've been more busy than usual lately. I know you were chasing me for some time, and I was like, I've actually been more busy since the quarantine than normal, but
it's a different style.
Different busy, yeah, it's different busy.
So I know one of the things that that you do is you mentor people, don't you? You help to mentor. There's not a better word than that. And I'm very hopeful that you might be running some more masterclasses at some point. Are you?
Yeah, I do want to get one in before we get back into training world again. I do want to do some more on the meta model. We did the one for the team on nested loops, and that was a lot of fun. But I do want to get into some of the meta model, the advanced pieces. I think there's so much in, even for me, my first go-to is meta model, but the magic in that is what's not there. Because the inverse of the meta model, which is actually part of the Milton model, when you're actually utilizing the meta model, using it for purpose, is where the magic is in terms of setting direction, like we just talked about with clients, where you want to set a particular flow or an increase or a direction or a purpose. You can actually utilize the meta model patterns So you're going to use the deletions, you're going to use a distortion, you're going to use a generalization, and that becomes part of the Milton model. Because to me, they go hand in hand. You know, they're even described in some of the books as, you know, it's a Mobius loop, you know, where one side flips to the other side, and they work in conjunction, because that's how you build great future pacing. That's how you build, you know, great generative change process, is when you can begin to use the meta model patterns, because they already make sense in the brain. And especially if you're paying attention and you know the way your client represented their desired states with the right patterns, and you use those patterns to build the future pace for the change and the generative change. So you know what deletions to use, what generalizations to use, what distortions to use, to build up that level of beliefs and values, so that, you know, it's a generative change that makes sense. And again, you got to get those patterns down and do them in a fun way. You know, you turn it into a game. Yeah. You know, you always find ways to make it creative.
Yeah. And again, when I reflect back on the first practitioner course that I trained people in, I remember my nervousness was in, how do I teach meta model? How do I do? I was really comfortable with Milton model. How do, and I, you know, it was dry. It felt sticky and hard, because I knew it was important, but I didn't find a way. And then I sort of came up with some sort of crazy mobile ideas with little words floating around, and as you'd imagine, and it was the beginning of trying to put something together in a 3D way to help me to see the depths of it. And it set me on my course for building more 3D patterns of how this works.
It really comes to using it, you know, to use it and to write it. We talked about this in the last one, the creativity, and I got to tell you, it's because it's that full sensory experience. Speaking them is one thing, but also writing them out. I tell my practitioner students all the time, a lot of times you get stuck somewhere on a train or a plane, or not so much now anymore, but a waiting room somewhere. I always joke that they can go pick up the magazines that are in the waiting room that everyone else touched, or you can just pull out your notebook or your iPad and use that time to just generate. You know, you sit there and you think of simple deletions and just generate 10 or 15 simple deletions. You know, I got it. I understand. You know, just generate them, write them down. Then, you know, go through the whole thing and then just generate, you know, 10 or 15, you know, universal quantifiers. You know, every time I take a breath, I feel wonderful. You know, and I never. So you just start, you know, writing them out, because there's magic in that. When you write something out physically, you're doing the kinesthetic part, of course. Yes. We all know that when we read, we do it auditorily as well as visually. I don't know many people that just, you know, completely visual read. Those are the ones that do it very quickly. Of course, that's the whole thing about photo reading, is they shut off the internal, you shut off the auditory and just snapshot everything in. You know, this whole process of writing them out, because you're doing all three at once. You're seeing it, you're auditorily saying it to yourself, and you're kinesthetically writing it. And it is one of the best ways to start building those patterns in. And that way you're going to recognize them, you're going to hear them, and you're going to start using them. And that's the key, is to not only just hear them, but to be able to start generating them as well. So that when you're taking the client to the process of future pace, or to the process of making that reframe or making that shift, that you'll be able to utilize the patterns as well, that you know that are going to be pushing them over the edge, or expand that model, or point them to that purpose that they gave you, because you were listening to the patterns up front. So you can actually generate them.
Research, isn't there, about the value of cursive writing as well, that whole kinesthetic action?
Yeah, they tried to get rid of that here for a while. They're bringing it back now.
Yeah. And, you know, I do wonder how we're shortening some of those little programs inside our brains because we're constantly on it, type, what do you call it? Typewriter? No. Keyboard.
Typewriter.
Keyboard.
Keyboard.
That's the word. And it makes perfect sense neurologically for us to engage in that formation of
Absolutely.
a word. And as you say, you've got all three primary senses engaged. And I hope that the schools will think more about bringing back an emphasis into cursive writing.
Right. I remember, I'm trying to think, I had done a little bit of work. Had a chance to work with a child who was brain damaged, and I was a teenager at the time, and they showed us things to do for patterning. You know, they literally would take the baby and, you know, move the arms and the legs. It would take 5 or 6 people and turn the head, and, you know, and they would put peanut butter on his tongue, and they would do all these things to be stimulating the brain from the outside to get the body to do things. And he did improve over the years. You know, I could see, because I probably 2 or 3 years that I would volunteer to go be part of this patterning team. It was a neighborhood child, and I had to be about 13 or 14 years old maybe, and you could see the difference. It was a huge difference. But I was talking to one of the nurses that used to come and guide the process, you know, because they had different people coming, because it had to be done like almost around the clock. I mean, it was in the beginning, people were there at all hours of the day and night doing this thing. And I'd never heard of anything like this, because, you know, everything in the past would, you know, they would want to put that child in a hospital, you know, one of those places, throw the key away basically, or just say, oh, they'll never be any different than they are now. But it was amazing. You know, he actually, by the time I had stopped doing it, he was actually talking. He would say, mama, he would say, you know, water, things like that. I mean, he was actually starting to talk, and he was improving. He still couldn't walk, but he could, if you held his hands, he could, you know. So, I mean, it was like amazing, because the development, and it was all this external stimulation. And I was talking to the nurse one time, and at that time, there was no word about getting rid of cursive writing. In fact, then it was like, it had to be the right angle of the loop, you know, if you didn't quite do it right. And we were talking about that process. And she said, I got to tell you, she said, the whole thing about cursive writing is that they want you to do the particular angle in the loop, and it has to be perfect. And she showed me some things. She said, take something like the letter L, and she said, and just do the letter L over and over again, like down in all one, just doing this kind of thing of the letter L, and then do the, you know, the circles in rows of just circles, you know, and she said, the more you do that, the more you stimulate your brain. And I was like, really? And I used to doodle like that whenever I was in class or whatever, just at time. And I would just see these L kind of things that would start to look like eternity symbols almost, you know, because you start doing a big L and just keep going down, 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 down. And then circle, 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 circles. And then the other one was S's or something. And she said, because you don't want to always have the same angle and the same loop, you know, unless you're going to be doing calligraphy writing or something for a living, she said. But the more that you make those motions, the left to right and the curve and the curl and the circle and she said it actually stimulates the brain. I mean, these people were so far ahead of, you know, what I even see now with patients like this, and they were just, it's just amazing to me.
It bugged me for many years when you look at the if you go into I don't know what the politically correct term is, but a special needs school, I think that's not current, but you know what I mean. The amazing sensory stimulation that these kids have, it is awesome. And I think, well, why aren't other kids having that? What,
Exactly.
why do you have to be in that category to be able to activate and stimulate and all those possible neural pathways? I always think of it as sort of, I run a sensory, a mind spa, which is, working through all the sensory systems. It's kind of submodality work, but my metaphor in my brain, it's like cleaning out the pipes. How far can you get them to grow? Why don't we do that? And what do we do instead? We say,
Yeah.
sit still, don't we? I mean, one of my kids, who's grown up now, but had a range of labels, including dyspraxia. And at the time, Sting, the musician, had also a child of a similar age who also had dyspraxia. It was in the news. And then apparently it was cured by brush stimulation. And I remember reading this, and I was really keen to do everything. We did the physio, we did the occupational therapy, we did everything we possibly could. But I couldn't quite understand at the time how that stimulating just the skin with a brush could work, and the reflexes. And of course now I think, we missed a trick. Because, and it's back to that, what stops us taking a new action? If you don't have, what's missing was, I didn't understand how it worked. And we know so much now about how neurology is it's how we learn.
The part that I find funny for myself is that, there's so much coming out in neuroscience now. And to me, this is stuff that Richard's been saying for 50 years, and it's like now the world's catching up, now people are like, whoa, and I'm like, we've been saying this. So I find it kind of nice that they're catching up finally, and even in psychology, Richard would be the first one to tell you that the whole lore about psychologists hating NLP wasn't true. The predominance of them flocked to Richard because they were frustrated with not being able to actually do things, and they would bring Richard clients and amazed at what was happening. And now there's a whole branch in psychology, the cognitive behavioral therapy and stuff is it's not pure NLP, but it's they've taken those notions and doing more things and getting away from the I feel depressed, here, have a pill, I'm talking to myself negatively, oh, you're schizophrenic, have a pill, so we're getting away from that. They're catching up with it, and the whole field of neuroscience is just mind-blowing, especially adding it with nutrition. And so it's kind of nice now to have some validity. That the world's catching up. And these are the things we've been teaching for, not me 50 years, but Richard. Gosh, I'm trying to even think. I'll probably about 35 years for us.
Wow.
That we've been teaching, but I'm glad they finally, arrived. And it's great because when you read the journals now, I read the neuroscience journals and articles and things coming out, and it really helps stimulate the things that I'm working on, to the next time, because I'm always constantly trying to change things up with teaching and the exercises we do and what we do with the team. And so it's like, it just kind of helps stimulate that, and also gives us better examples to use when training, that we can refer to something that they might have heard on the news or on TV or, or in some journal. So, it's really great how it's all been working hand in hand in that respect.
Yeah. I always think science catches up eventually. And, one of the things I'm particularly interested, many things I'm interested in is like herbal medicine, for example.
Right.
And isn't it, for me, it's fascinating that the herbs that were used 2,000 years ago to treat a certain thing, now they can prove how that herb works as it crosses the brain-blood barrier and the receptors that activate. And so science is like, maybe there's something in this thing that's been around for like 2,000 years. And how did
How
they?
can we turn it into a pharmaceutical and write a prescription for it?
Yeah, no, that's another thing. But yeah, I love that science eventually catches up. So
Yeah, no, it's cool now. I mean, the things that you can see, Richard has always had the most wonderful toys, because it's nice to have that ability to see what the brain is doing, or to be able to get, some evidence and change just enhances what we do.
You mentioned that you're always interested, and I know that this is part of the attitude for all of us as NLPers. You're always interested in finding out more and creating new ways to develop the models within NLP. And something you said, you've been involved in NLP for 35 years, and I'm just 15 years in, and I learn something new every day without
Absolutely.
fail. And I was just going to ask you if that's the same, but clearly it is.
Absolutely. I mean, people say to me all the time, they'll see me, they'll see John and I, when we do the seminars, Richard teaches in the morning, and then John and I are usually on in the afternoons, one with the prac, one with the master prac. And so, but they see us there in the mornings in the back of the room. We're sitting in the back of the room, we're doing our emails or whatever, but we're listening to what Richard's doing. And people are like, why are you up so early? You could be sleeping till noon and you just come in the afternoon when you're going to train. And I'm like, I'm not missing a thing. I mean, people say to me, how many practitioner programs have you sat through? And I go, thousands? I don't know. And they said, well, don't you get tired of hearing it? And I'm like, no, it's different every time. And this is what I tell people too, that we get people that come in, they go, I want to be an NLP trainer. And I go, oh, great. Do you have any NLP training? No. Okay. So what do you want to do? Well, I want to do a practitioner and then master practitioner, and then I'm going to do my trainer's training. So it's September. Can I get that done by New Year's? And I'm like, maybe, but I definitely wouldn't suggest it, because it's like, practitioner training in itself, sometimes a person goes through so much personal transformation. I know I did. When I got done with my practitioner training, I sat there and I went, I haven't a clue what to do for anybody else. I'm great. I feel wonderful. But I immediately went back and redid my practitioner training in the next cycle, because I had really not much idea of what happened in that practitioner training, because I was just greedily going, oh, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to change this. Oh, I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to fix it. I was like kid in a candy shop, and when I got done with my practitioner, I was like brand shiny new, but I didn't really feel confident with what I had learned. So I ended up redoing it. And every time I sit in a practitioner, I get another nuance, another shift, another paradigm, another angle, another idea, because I teach this when I'm teaching in NLP. I use the example of the movie Airplane. I don't know if you've seen that movie Airplane. Okay, so now I think I've seen that movie about 8 times. And every time I've asked people, I go, have you seen it more than once? And they go, yeah. And I go, did you notice anything the second or third or fourth or fifth time you saw it? And they said, oh yeah, it's so weird. Like the first time I saw it, and then it was like the second time, there was a joke about the microwave range or something. He goes, I never got that until I saw it the second or third time. And then somebody else will go, I saw that movie 5 times and I'm still seeing stuff in the background, or the ambiguities they're doing, or the jokes that they're doing. And every time you watch it, you see something else. And I go, exactly. I said, because each time you finish a practitioner course, or each time you do a training, you're at a whole different level. Your filters have changed. You're at a different level of beliefs and values. You're at different sorting patterns. You have different experiences to bounce things off of. So when you go, people say to me, why would I want to repeat a practitioner? You may not want to, but if you do, you'd be surprised what you'll pick up. You're not going to sit there and be bored every day and go, oh God, ambiguities again. It's like,
oh my God, no.
Depending on the trainer. I mean, if you're a really good NLP trainer, that's not going to happen. But that, it's that whole notion of, you're different. And so you're at a different level. So every time I go through the practitioner information, half the time it happens to me when I'm training, and I'm sure you've done this too. And it almost derailed me one time because I had this huge revelation, and I'm in the middle of teaching the meta model. And I'm like, and then, if you look at the cause and effect of this, and I'm like, and I was like, for a moment, I was like, in my head, I'm going, oh my God, I just realized if I use this over here. And then I realized that I had stopped talking, and I looked at the audience, and they were like, and I'm like, so this word in the middle is the conjunction. And I had to keep going on. And then afterwards, I literally walked out of the training room, went to the ladies' room, and just kind of went, oh my God. It was like, because it just, something connected that wasn't connected before, and I had taught the meta model, 1,000 times before, but it was this one time I was teaching it, something connected. And it's funny because now I have to learn how to, I definitely put a fail-safe in there. I don't derail like that anymore on the stage, but I almost completely derailed because it was such a huge revelation. And I just locked up, and I was like, in my head, I'm going, oh my God, this is great. I'm going to.
Oh, you're so good though, because you keep it inside. I would be like, oh, I got to tell you. I would have to put it on the outside. Yeah, we're just going to test this out. I'm not sure where it's going, but bear with me. I'm
not sure they would have been ready for it. It was something I was working on for the master prac, and if I had tried to do it with the practitioner, it would just completely.
Wow.
It would have completely derailed what I was trying to do with them. So I just shoved it to the side till I had to go in the ladies' room, just have some quiet.
Do you know,
and put it together.
Every time I come to one of the trainings, I always start a new notebook. And so I have, big pile of notebooks now. And I always sit at the back, and I'm, whatever I choose to filter for to learn, try to learn something new. And when I look back through those notebooks and see the patterns repeating themselves, and something that I just got an aha on, like yesterday, if I look back at an old notebook, it was there. I'd made a note about it, but I wasn't ready to feel it in
right.
this way. And the other thing, just talking about doodles as well, because I'm a doodler, when I look at some of those doodles, instantly it's like the metaphor. I remember everything about that learning in that moment.
Yeah.
All captured in that drawing doodle. And
there's magic in that. There really is magic, and that's I understand people don't write as much as they want, and that's why we really stop too, because people want to walk into the seminars with their laptops up, and they want to take notes on their laptop, or they want to take notes on their iPad, and we're like, first of all, it's distracting as hell because tippity tappity, and just the movement, it's distracting, so we don't allow it. But people just want to get locked into doing those things that way, and the cursive is really it's great. We don't want people taking copious amounts of notes anyway, the students, because we want them to have the experience, to experience and that's like I'm saying, and teach the meta model. I give them the experience of each model first, each pattern, before I even tell them what the pattern is. I won't even tell them the label of it, so simply like simple deletions. I start off with, I just walk to the front of the stage and I look at somebody in the audience and I go, I got it. And they just look at me like, and I go, I got it. And they look at me and I go, well, what's the question on your mind? They're like, got what? And then I look at somebody else and I go, I understand. And they go, understand what? And I go, exactly. It's like some information is just simply left out. Right? And they're all like, yeah. I woke up and I go, I know. Now they're jumping. I know what? And I go, that's right. I go, information just simply left out. Let's see, what should we call this? Simple deletion. That'll be good. And I write, and everybody laughs, and they're laughing as I write up simple deletion. So they're having a good time. They're anchored to the pattern in a fun way, but they've already experienced it. When you tell them the title, now it makes sense. You know, if I start off going, okay, so the next thing we're going to do is simple deletions. Now everybody in their head's going, simple deletions. What's that? Is that like a deletion? Is it like more than one deletion, but it's simple? Is it simply deleted? You know, you got all this chatter in their head, or they jump onto what they think it means, and then you try and explain it, and you're unexplaining and re-explaining, and it doesn't work. So, you know, for me, the ability to actually give people the experience of the patterns first, so they feel it, they have the connection to it, and then I make it so obvious when I give them the title that they laugh, and they're laughing when I'm putting it up on the chart. So now it makes sense and they're anchored. So it's just, these are the ways that, you know, if we help people, whether we're coaching with them or training them, or whether, you know, we're teaching them, you know, it's about giving them the experience first so that it makes sense. And then I tell them afterwards, go write out these patterns, you know, even if you just did 10 of each a day, you know, if you really want to be ambitious, do 20, 50, 100, doesn't matter. But even if you just wrote out 10 a day of each of the meta model patterns, it wouldn't take that long. And because the more you do it cursively, installing it in the 3 systems, then, you know, you'll start generating them, you'll start hearing them more, you'll start being able to use them easily. And it just makes everything else that you're going to do with your client, whatever that means, easy.
Yeah, and it reminds me of the teenagers that I sometimes coach who are looking to learn easier, embed their curriculum in easier ways. That's not what they ask for. They just say, "Help! You know, I'm a rubbish learner. I can't remember anything." But actually, what they're looking for is a new skill, and just bringing in those 3 systems during the process of learning is often all they need. It's this huge light bulb moment for them. I love it.
Funny story. When I was in college, I was in pre-med at that time. So I was in university, and we had a huge load on that level of students. So we were taking major courses. There was hardly any room for the couple electives they made you take, you know. But so you're doing things like physical chemistry, analytical chemistry, embryology, calculus, physics, you know, all in one semester, you know, embryology or something. It was like, you're just like, ugh. And we got to this one final that was coming up, and we were having such trouble. We had to remember the Krebs cycle, which is the whole, you know, cycle of how production and digestion inside. And so we couldn't get it. And now there's 6 of us studying, and it's like 3 a.m. And we actually set up with our notebooks, and who had colored markers and who had straws and some cups and things. We built an amusement park that took us through the Krebs cycle.
Absolutely, yeah.
And of course we were punchy as hell because we hadn't slept for like 2 days. We were on these crazy marathon finals studying, and there was probably some wine involved too, I'm sure. But we were completely looped out of our minds, and we built, and I remember this thing vividly to this day, but we built this amusement park that we all, and everybody in the group just all of a sudden immediately understood it.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like, holy cow. And it was a very complex process with the molecules and transformations and catalysts and everything that had to go into the process. And we had it down to where we flipped this over, and this pen flipped over, and this cup tipped, and this was the, you know, and then the catalyst is, and this is, and we had this entire amusement park built, but none of us had an issue with that final the next day. And none of us could have even explained it to you 5 minutes before we did this, because we were just so confused about it. So sometimes it takes doing something like that to just, you know, make it fun, to make it unusual, make it different. But this isn't something that any of our professors would have told us. Well, if you get some cups and some straws and some colored markers, and you could make like an amusement park. I mean, it would have been helpful if some of you had told us that, but, you know, but I mean, these are the things that, you know, as a human being, we have that creativity. And sometimes, you know, there even be people, if somebody had walked in, a parent or somebody had walked in and went, why are you wasting time? You're supposed to be studying. That's not how you study. You know, it's like, an anchor to it. You're laughing, you're having fun with it, and you remember it. Who cares?
It's how little children learn. They're amazing. They teach us everything we need to know. They just watch and copy, and they feel it. And it's one of the great things about social media is you can watch all these little videos of children just learning. You know, whatever it is they're doing, they're fully immersed in their kinesthetic, in their somatic bodily experience. They're just there, and it's all 3D for them. And I love that. I love that.
People always say to me, "Oh, is NLP really difficult to work with children?" And I'm like, no, working with adults is difficult compared to children. Children are much easier to work with in NLP because the fact that they are still in that playful learning, you know, and they don't question as much as adults that have all these systems, belief systems and things built up. Because you can say to a child, okay, now you take that feeling in your stomach and make it pink and fuzzy and you know, and let it tickle your stomach instead of, you know, making your stomach hurt or something. You say that to an adult and they look at you like, what? You know, you tell them, you know, take the picture and make it like purple lights in the picture. And an adult would be like, does it have to be purple? What if I wanted blue lights? Could I put blue lights in the picture? Does it have to be? So it's like, but a child, you could tell them to make the picture bigger, shrink the picture down, push the picture away, you know, things that we tell adults in NLP as well for working with some modalities or swish pattern or something. But it's like a lot of times, you know, people will question it and they go, I'm not sure I'm moving it fast enough. Am I moving it fast enough? How many times people go up to Richard and they go, I'm not sure I was in the trance deep enough, you know, or they go, I wasn't as deep as he was. Well, how do you know how deep that person next to them was? My trance wasn't as deep as their trance, you know, because, you know, we have all these things going on, you know, and children don't do that, you know, they just go for it, you know, and it's easier in a lot of ways to work with children because they have that wonderful ability to play. I mean, that's even in the animal world, they learn by play. You know, the lion cubs and the dog cubs, the dog puppies and fox cubs and things, they play fight. That's how they learn. You know, they look like they're rolling around having a great time, but they're actually learning how to survive in the wild. They're learning how to kill prey, or they're learning how to defend themselves. So, you know, it's this whole play fighting thing, play learning. It's innate in all of us. It's innate as adults, but we just don't do it as much as being civilized humans. We don't do it as much as we used to. And that's something that, you know, I know you have a passion about that, and I have a passion about that, is bringing that back, bringing crazy back. You know, so
sometimes the more serious that my clients are, you know, if I'm in a company and I've got a very serious senior leader, you know, right up to the very top of the company, the more serious they are, the more I'm just like, God, we've got to be so playful here. Just have all these little strategies to get them to loosen up and lighten up.
Yeah.
But I think your point,
you can't take it not seriously either. I mean, you don't want to come off as you're not taking the problem seriously. It's a different kind of play,
isn't there? Yes, playfulness. If my state is playful, then it becomes contagious if it's a congruent state, of course. A point about kids, I think, is my most frequently spoken sentence is working with kids is a doddle. It's the system that they live in that, you know, so I always have to, like, I've got to deal with the beliefs and the values and the filters of the parents, the teachers, the siblings, the aunties, the uncles, the teachers, that's who we are working with. Because the children they're just a gift. I love the way that they just absorb. They come up with these. I had a child came up with a wonderful idea about having a unicorn stab the nightmares, and she came up with it all by herself. And you know, and she was working with submodalities. The unicorn's horn's going to stab into the nightmares. The nightmares would disintegrate, and then, you know, you get the parents who go, well, well, anyway, I think you should sleep with mummy anyway, just in case the nightmares come back again. And so, you know, we have to, so I have to educate the parents because they don't have that bit in place.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love
Children
it.
are very, very creative. They're very resourceful. I grew up as an only child, so I was always finding unique ways to entertain myself because, you know, parents were all working and I didn't have siblings to play with. I didn't have a pet. So it was like I found all kinds of crazy things to do. And I think that's part of my creativity strategy is so crazy wild because, you know, it's like I can look at anything and find something fun to do with it. So I think that's, you know, part of as a child, you know, have that childlike qualities. You know, when I teach the master prac, I do a whole thing with them in the beginning that to bring them back to that, you know, I put them on the spot to do something. I don't want to spoil it in case anyone walks into my master prac, but I put them on the spot to do something and they just go into panic, you know, which is something that if I did that same thing with a child, they would be like, you know, in a whole nother realm. And yet, you know, you say something or hand something to an adult and they go into panic mode because they feel everything's a test. Everything's am I doing this right? And children don't do that. You know, you hand them a lollipop and they're not going to sit there and have a discussion about whether or not I should have it. Is it the right time for me? Is it the right flavor? You know, gee, where's this lollipop been? I wonder how old it is. Is it still with an expiration date? Or, you know, like, just don't have that kind of discussion inside, you know. So the same thing with a new opportunity. And the downside is you have to teach your children that, you know, if somebody goes, hey, you want to go see my puppies that live in my van? No. You know, you have to kind of quell that down in certain situations. But, you know, because they are so, you know, spontaneous and it's like if something sounds wonderful, I'm going for it. And, you know, so you have to kind of take that kind of quality and part of what we end up doing in NLP is reteaching adults, you know, how to go back to that, you know, magical thinking, that child thinking, because we've just, you know, in a lot of cases, we've squashed it. And, you know, in some of our cases, like you and me, we've probably not squashed it.
I've been trying for a long time, but I'm not having it.
I love that saying. I always go, you know, it's like I have to get old, but I don't have to grow up. You know, it's like, it's not a choice. I don't have to grow up. No one says I have to grow up. I have to get old. And that happens every day, but I do not have to grow up. I just refuse. Not buying that one.
I know. We just, how much fun can we have? You're lovely. The last podcast, where you talked about setting up the day with that wonderful question. You know, how much fun can I have today?
Yeah. What can I do? And this is so important. This is the whole premise we talked about earlier, the purpose. You know, you have to have a purpose in mind. And if your purpose is how miserable can I make myself today, you're going to get a different result than, you know, how much fun can I have today? What can I do that's fun today? Especially now with this situation. You know, I've had lots of time to do things that, you know, I haven't done in a while. I don't have as much time, I should say. I have more desire now, but I don't have as much time as I really could because we've been busy with things like this. And I love doing this. It's not the same as I miss the live audiences. Even when we did that session for the nested loops for the trainer team, and I got done afterwards and I was like, Tom messaged me and he goes, how do you think you did? I said, I really don't know. I said, I think it was good. I said, because it was like, I like to feel that energy going back and forth, you know, and he's going, I'm getting tons of comments how great it was. And I'm like, okay. But it was like, it's a different experience when you have people in the room and they're interacting. And I said, but they were all just like smiling and staring, you know, so it's a different experience. But I think that the more we do this, that we build another option. We have to have options to keep things going, and we have to have resources for people. So it's good that we're doing these sort of things. Hopefully we'll see them in some trainings down the road.
I hope so. Talking to John about how we have to calibrate differently, just as you're saying on the screen, it's just there's such this tiny little part that we can calibrate, and then the more the boxes get smaller, yeah, but it really ups our game, doesn't it? And
Yeah, absolutely.
there's so much time that's flown. That was, I don't know how that happened, time distortion.
I hope you accomplished what you wanted to.
Oh, it was
Some of it.
absolutely brilliant. So Kathleen, thank you so much. It has been enlightening and wonderful, instructive, fun, creative. I don't know how many other words I can find. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And
We can make an exercise out of that if you want.
how many words can we put together to describe it? Yeah, it's been wonderful. Thank you so very much. And I'll put your website as usual on there. So that's www.purenlp.com.
Yes.
And also the nlpeternal.com.
Yes. Yeah, that's our new streaming site. Yeah.
All resources. So thank you so much. And
You're
obviously,
welcome,
if anybody wants to get in touch with Kathleen, you'll be able to do that through her website. Anybody hungry for mentoring, or I think I don't know if you've got any slots left, but I'll leave it to people's own creative imaginations. Thank you so much for being here, Kathleen. Absolutely.
You're very welcome, Kay. It's always a pleasure speaking with you, and I miss you.
So, I miss you. Hug.
Virtual hugs. Hopefully we'll get back into the training room soon. In the meantime, we'll keep doing fun stuff like this as well, and we can reach people and help people out. I really appreciate everything you do, especially for the children and the teenagers. Sometimes those teenagers kind of get lost in the middle. And so I really appreciate everything you do for bringing happy brains to people.
Thank
you.
So
I love what you do with the happy brains and the technology, and keep doing it.
Well, it's all leading. It's all in the same system. We're all leading towards how much more NLP can we help people to build these wonderful, glorious new minds that we're evolving. And so
absolutely,
team NLP.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, Kate.
Take care.
Well.
Bye.